Voidmage Gamer is now partnered with Flipside Gaming, so you can use the promo code on their website, all caps, Voidmage, to get 10% off all orders $10 or more. It's a great way that you can support both Flipside Gaming and Voidmage Gamer's channel. Hello guys, welcome back to another Commander Top 10 video. This time we're going to be doing the Izzet Top 10 post Ravnica Allegiance, so anything after that is unknown to me as of the making of this video, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, I hate Izzet. Or really, I just hate making videos about Izzet because it's so hard to pin things down. Most of the really good Izzet cards are sort of specific commander options. You have your Spell Slinger strategy, which is very common in the colors, but you also have some token strategies, you also have some artifact synergies, just very specific commander options with maybe not so many good cards in Izzet colors aside from those. So when it comes to ranking Izzet, it's always been a difficult thing for me, so I'm going to give it my best shot. I have no problem selecting a number 1 for Izzet. That card is actually pretty easy. If you know what cards I'm into, if you know what I really value in the format, it shouldn't take you too long to guess what that card is. But as far as honorable mentions go, I mean, throw a dart. There are a ton of good commander options in Izzet, so just because it isn't on my list doesn't mean I think it's terrible. We have a few NIV Mewsettes, so we can't have all of them on the list. We have a couple Jorahs. We just have a lot of good commander options, and we have Malec, Izzet Paragon, a decent Spellslinger option. The only problem is that there's a lot of good Spellslinger cards. I think Malec's a pretty good commander, but we have some interesting stuff in here as well, and a commander option that I personally feel is a better Spellslinger commander. So let's start it off here with number 10, Steam Augury. I love this card. It's one of my favorite in Izzet. It's very practical. It's basically Fact or Fiction in reverse. So you're the one that's making the piles and you have an opponent choose. However you view that, it could be better or worse. This time, I guess it just requires you to do a lot of thinking, whereas with Fact or Fiction, you would put that burden on your opponent. But I just like cards that put that decision making in your hands. So as far as design goes, it's just like Fact or Fiction. Pretty good card. Number 9 is Thousand Year Storm. A relatively new card, hasn't seen as much play as I maybe anticipated when Guilds of Ravnica first came out, but I still think it's a pretty powerful card. You would prefer to have an enabler like this out there earlier, maybe not a 6 mana enchantment, but what it does is pretty insane. It basically gives your spells, your instants and sorceries Storm. So basically it just copies your instants and sorceries for each time you cast an instant or sorcery in that same turn, which is pretty crazy, but the minimum requirement for this is you're gonna need at least a couple instants and sorceries to get any real value out of this, and in retrospect, it's not the overwhelmingly powerful card that I maybe thought it was when Guilds of Ravnica first came out, but I still think that if you're in the colors to play it, if you're gonna play this Izzet Spellslinger theme, Thousand Year Storm is definitely a shoo-in for your deck. It's a good card. All you really need with it are good cantrips, maybe Frantic Search, Brass's Bounty, any way to get extra mana, more card draw. It could be a really cool card. Number 8 is Ahshee Lee the Gifted. Pretty much just knocked out whatever Planeswalker I thought was going to be good enough for the list before, like Dack Fayden or Ral Zarek. As much as I love Dack Fayden's -2, Ahshee Lee is even better in my opinion. Yes, you don't just steal an artifact permanently, but you get cost reduction that is insane in artifact decks. Think of all of the Eldrazi you can cast just by having a ton of artifacts, how many spells you can pretty much cast for free because of this. Even if this is the only really good thing about her, her other abilities are okay, they're not fantastic. Her ult could potentially be a win con if you have a ton of artifacts. But really, cost reduction, mana ramp, it's a big thing in the format. The more explosive plays you can have in a single turn, the more likely you are to win. So Ahshee Lee the Gifted, maybe not the most interesting design on a Planeswalker, but in terms of just power, I think she's probably one of the most powerful Planeswalkers we're going to see in these colors for a while. Number 7 is Jorah of the Guiteau. And yes, I am putting her on the list over the Weatherlight Captain, and a lot of that has to do with design. I mean, Suspend as a mechanic is interesting. It's fun. If you can add some synergy to the deck, fool around with some time counters, that's pretty cool. But you can play some pretty expensive cards if you're just willing to wait, and that's the cool thing about Suspend. You can play Massive Eldrazi sooner. A lot of those are above 10 mana, so you can do this really early, like turn 4. It's going to make you a huge target, but that's Commander. You want big plays, you want to have a lot of fun, and as far as design, as far as just experimenting with different play styles, Jorah of the Guiteau is one of the more unique commanders that you can go with because you just rarely ever see Suspend You don't really see a lot of cards that can enable Suspend, especially when that could be your commander. And the Weatherlight Captain, as far as combo potential goes, I mean, it's there. If you're not going to go off and combo, you just draw a card for casting historic spells, so that's kind of boring. With Jorah of the Guiteau, you don't have to be too overwhelmingly powerful with your playstyle. You don't have to go with Eldrazi, you could just go with other big spells. It's a unique playstyle, it's not something you're going to see a lot of. I think the rarity of the mechanic in and of itself just makes Jorah of the Guiteau an appealing commander option, so that's why I feel like she's good for number 7. Number 6 is Brew, Clad, Telcor Engineer from Commander 2018. Brew, Clad is insane. If you don't have a Brew, Clad deck and you're looking for the new greatest Izzet commander option to play with, 2018 gave us a really good one. If you hate the typical Spellslinger strategy and you wanted to go with something unique for the colors, you have a pretty cool token option with Brew, Clad. And the thing that makes it really interesting to me is it's not just creature tokens, but it's tokens period. So if you have a card like Brass's Bounty, if you have a Spell Swindle, make all those treasure tokens into some pretty cool creature tokens, like the Desolation Twin token, or if you have a Wormcoil Engine, kill that and make all of your creatures Lifelink worms or Death Touch worms. There's a lot of cool experiments that you can have with this type of commander, and I think just the design there alone, the fact that it's so creative, makes Brew, Clad kind of like my argument for Jorah, a very unique option, and that's very appealing to me whenever you go and experiment with different commanders. You want to stand out as a player, you want to have some unique explosive plays, and I feel like the combination of awesome tokens with incredible aggression, I mean, this deck is really aggressive. It can come out of nowhere and just win games because all of your creature tokens have haste with Brew, Clad, and you're making another creature token. There's spells like Chancellor of the Forge that can net you a ton of creature tokens. Even after a board wipe, you can just come out of nowhere and win the game. Super aggressive and really good recovery. Number 5 is the Locust God. I have a confession to make. I do not like Keranos, God of Storms. Just the design is incredibly boring. It's lightning bolt on your upkeep, best case scenario. And you only get one target. In a multiplayer format, that's not going to cut it for me. So as far as the gods go, especially from that Theros block, Keranos is one of the most underwhelming and weakest, at least in Commander. The Locust God, however, is a really good Izzet colored god that rewards you with Locust tokens every time you draw a card. And the benefit of the gods from Hour of Devastation is that instead of being indestructible, they just don't really die that well, because you get to return them to your hand, you get to recast them over and over again. They're consistent problems to have to deal with for your opponents, which makes them fantastic. He has an activated ability where you can draw a card anyway, but most of the time you're just going to be playing spells like Windfall, Brainstorm, anything that can net you a ton of card draw. And the Locust God can be kind of like Brew, Clad, where you can come out of nowhere with just a ton of aggression, hasty creature tokens, and I guess he would make a pretty good inclusion for a Brew, Clad deck, seeing as that's even more creature tokens and a lot of ways to get more of them. Number 4 is Mizzix of the Iz Magnus. So if you want to embrace Izzet and you just want to be a spell slinger, you have probably the best option in the colors. Mizzix of the Iz Magnus, kind of like Animar, for instance, in sorceries. Well, not really, not as good as that, but if you pay attention to the casting cost for all of your spells, you should be able to get enough experience counters where if you have a massive burn spell, you don't have to pay nearly as much to deal a lot of damage to your opponents. Or if you want to do something like a Blue Sun Zenith and draw even more cards, massive X-costed spells are fantastic with Mizzix. Even better enabler than the Thousand Year Storm in my opinion, more consistent anyway. It's just insane how much you're able to do with Mizzix when all she really does is just make your spells cheaper, and how busted a mechanic experience was from Commander 2015. Every time you get Mizzix out there, you still have those experience counters, so it doesn't matter if you have to reset, replay her all over again, your spells are still going to have that cost reduction. It's incredible. While it isn't really going to do much to reduce the cost of your counter spells, it is going to make a lot of draw spells cheaper, a lot of burn spells cheaper, massive spells cheaper in general, and that's really what you want to do. Incredible enabler, explosive plays, you can make them even easier with this commander. She's a ton of fun. Number 3 is Epic Experiment. Speaking of massive spells, big plays, Epic Experiment is definitely one of them. If you're playing spell slingers, instants, and sorceries, you fill your deck with them, Epic Experiment is potentially a win con. And it's even more so if you're playing something like Storm. You get to exile the top X cards of your library, and then whatever instants and sorceries you have that are converted mana cost X or less, you get to cast those without paying their mana cost. So like I said with Mizzix, if you're able to reduce the cost of this spell, you could potentially have X be 20. If you're able to look at the top 20 cards of your deck and then cast however many instants and sorceries out of those for free, you shouldn't really have a tough time winning the game after that. And the more spells you're able to cast in a single turn, more likely you are to win the game anyway. But in terms of just pure power, this is one of the most powerful cards that you're going to find in the format. And if you are playing Izzet, chances are you're going to embrace some sort of spell slinger strategy anyway, unless you're playing one of the few very specific commander options I mentioned. You're just going to see nothing but cantrips, enablers, just a lot of combo potential in the format, and in Izzet colors, there's no shortage of that. Just a very powerful card. Number 2, we have NIV Mewsette Perun. Significantly more powerful than the other NIV Mewsettes in my opinion, because he can't be countered, so you don't really have to worry about that in a multiplayer format where you could have other opponents with counter spells. Having your combo enabler, or just having your enabler period, be uncounterable is such a significant thing, especially in the control matchup. Whenever your opponents want to cast something like a removal spell, you get to draw a card. If they want to play a Swords to Plowshares, you get to draw a card. Whenever any player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you get to draw a card. So it doesn't matter if you're casting something like a Ponder, you're going to draw a card anyway. You're going to draw a card first off of NIV Mewsette's trigger. So if you love Storm, if you love drawing into more cards off of simply casting your instants and sorceries, this NIV Mewsette is an insane combo enabler. And it's kind of like the Firemind, the really good NIV Mewsette before, where whenever you draw a card, it's going to deal 1 damage to a target. So pair this up with wheel effects, you can deal a ton of damage with this NIV Mewsette. And really the only pain in the ass about this one is the fact that he's very color specific, so 3 blue and 3 red. Not the easiest thing to throw into other multicolor decks, but if you're looking for just the most powerful commander option in these colors, I'm probably going to say it's this NIV Mewsette. I mean, hands down, just the combination of not being able to counter him and the fact that you're gonna get some value out of him. If your opponents want to play a removal spell, you're gonna be able to at least draw a card. I mean, that's just insane. You get to deal damage like you could before with the other NIV Mewsette. Just a lot of craziness going on here. Maybe in terms of design, he's not really anything refreshing, but in terms of power, if you want to look for some sort of powerful commander option and you want to stay true to Izzet and play a ton of instants and sorceries, NIV Mewsette Perun is the way to go. And then number 1 should be no surprise. Universal playability. If you're playing Izzet colors, I think it's a pretty good card. Maybe not for every deck. Izzet cards aren't necessarily the easiest thing to throw into other decks, but I think Counter Flux is a very powerful card. And a lot of people overlook the overload, but you'd be surprised how many games can be ended just because you can't counter enough. If you have to go up against cards like Tendrils of Agony or even Grape Shot, as hilarious as that sounds, cards like those can win games. Being able to overload and just counter all of those spells is crazy, and Counterflux itself can't be countered. So it should be no surprise why I think this is the best card in Commander in these colors. It's a perfect answer. I love cards like these. They're problem solvers. And just that ability to counter all spells you don't control, it's such a rare thing. We have Summary Dismissal. I guess if you want to play Time Stop, that's also a thing. But we don't have too many ways to stop your opponents from storming off because they just have so many spells on the stack. There's so many copies. You have to be able to counter all of them, and there aren't really many cards that do what Counterflux does, and that's fantastic. So yes, it's a brilliant card. If you're able to play it and you're looking for some counter spells, why not? I think it's fantastic. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about Izzet. Again, this was very difficult for me. I hate having to make a top 10 for Izzet because I genuinely find it hard to rank them. You just have a lot of different things going on here, so it's going to be a little bit more subjective, not just on power alone. But as always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.